This is Karl Moore talking management for the Globe and Mail. Today I'm speaking to Henry Chesbrough, who's a professor at the Haas School of Business, UC Berkeley. Good morning, Henry.
Good morning.
So Henry, one of the things you've been thinking about is innovation and services. What are some of the things that you've come to thinking about that?
I was led to the idea about innovation and services from a couple of very simple observations. One is that in countries like Canada, the United States, the OECD countries, each economy is now majority services activity, meaning that services comprise most of the economic activity. And depending on the source, in Canada and the United States, it's 70 or 80% of the GDP of each country is coming not from agriculture, not from manufacturing, but from something called services. So that was the first starting point. The second starting point is we know an awful lot more about how to innovate new products and technologies in agriculture and manufacturing than we do about how to innovate new services. And yet, if our economies are majority services based, it really becomes very important that we understand this much, much better than we do for our own well-being and prosperity going into the future. So that's how I got interested in this topic.
So what are some of the things you've learned about it that you could suggest to managers in services business that they consider as they try to drive innovation?
Well, one thing that I've learned in looking at this very carefully is that the role of the customer is very different in a services business. In the product and manufacturing business, you can give a customer something fixed and tangible to them as a product, and they can weigh it, they can measure it, they can look at it, and they can specify what they want. You can give them the object and they can say, oh yes, that's what I asked for, that meets my specifications, job done, congratulations.
Okay.
In a service business, it's very difficult to define and specify what it is that you want. You may have some things that you're asking for from me, and you explain some of that to me. I may have some ability to do things that I try to explain to you, but you can't fully explain what you want. I can't fully explain what I can do. And we don't have anything tangible between us to help us figure this out. And so what often happens is the customer is much more of a co-creator in a services innovation context. So as opposed to being a passive consumer that just takes what is given to them by the manufacturer and then we go and use it or consume it in some way. In the service business, we actively participate in not only defining and requesting what we want, but in then what we do with it as well. So we're much more actively involved. So that's, I think, an interesting starting point in this services domain.
So how do you get the customers involved? What are some of the things you've seen that are helpful practices?
Well, one company that I thought had a really fascinating journey on this is IBM. Which used to be a box company selling computers and associated stuff that came in boxes like disk drives and so on. Well, today most of IBM's revenues come from services. And one of the things that IBM has done as its practices is some of its own R&D staff in its research laboratories are going out of the laboratories to the customer's premises and actually locating on the customer's premises to work next to the bench with the customer to understand new challenges, new problems that the customer is having that IBM can help them with. So it's a very interesting thing to see. You've ever been to in these IBM labs, they're up on a hill far away from everybody else to keep ideas from leaking out. In this new model, we've got IBM researchers at a city group, for example, next to these other people trying to get ideas to come in. Right next door. So it's a fascinating transition in terms of those kinds of practices. So even the R&D staff are much more engaged with customers as a particular example of the kind of practice I'm seeing with service innovation.
Is there a concern about intellectual property in that context? Because if you're co-creating it, well, they've added the IP as well. Or is that simply not a concern in this issue?
It is absolutely a concern. What do you have? And what do you own? What do I have and what do I own? When we share, exchange with each other, who owns the results of that? These are very important challenges that have to be overcome. And IP, I think, is one of the areas that needs more attention with regard to innovation. It isn't something that you figure out at the end of the process of, okay, we've got something great here, now how much do you get, how much do I get? IP figures throughout the process, not only between us, but if you want to go use this with others, if I want to go use this in other activities, what rights do we have to do this? Those are very important things to understand from the beginning of an interaction.
It strikes me is that I worked for IBM for a number of years in the 70s and 80s, so know them well, that as you create that intellectual property, if I'm a consultant, what I want to do then is go sell it to every customer I can, because that's how I make money.
Yes.
On the other hand, you're saying, well, no, because if you do, my competitive advantage goes away. After a while, like the little while I have an advantage. So it seems like I would want a exclusive on this.
Well, you're right. Those are exactly some of the points in the discussion. Some of the rejoinders to that are, if you get something that is truly exclusive to you, to sustain it, maintain it, improve it, you bear the full costs of all of that. And you get no benefits of economies of scale from others as well. You get no benefits of learning from other companies and the improvements that they discover as well. And you probably don't want to pay that unless it's a really compelling advantage. In some cases you might, in which case it probably would be an exclusive arrangement. What I tend to see more often is what you were saying a moment ago, perhaps a 1 year or 2 year lead time advantage. Another thing that sometimes is negotiated is a field of use. So if you're a bank, I can't take this to another bank, but I might be able to use it, for example, in an insurance industry or something like that. So I get the rights as your supplier to use it in other businesses that don't threaten your competitive advantage, but give me more economies of scale and reduce my costs of supporting and serving you into the future.
This has been Karl Moore talking management for the Globe and Mail. Today I've been speaking to Henry Chesbrough, who's a professor at the Haas School, University of California at Berkeley.